Hey guys, how's it going? It's Danconia here. Welcome back to the Overwatch League Roundup. Stage 4, Week 3 results. So, we've got some clarity this week on who have actually qualified for the top 12. There's a lot more teams that have actually qualified now, and a few teams have fallen by the wayside. In terms of the play-ins, they are now eliminated, but we will take a look at the results first, and then we will go over who has had a good week and who has had a bad week in terms of their seedings. So, we started off with the London Spitfire taking on the Vancouver Titans. Now, both Vancouver and London had some shock results last week, not in a good way, but this was always going to be a tight game. They're two very, very good teams, and two teams that do turn up in these very blockbuster-ish games. London Spitfire will be kicking themselves, however, because this is a game they could have won quite easily, I think. Vancouver end up winning it 3-2 in the end, but it's a heartbreaker for London, because I honestly think London should have won this 3-1. They were so mighty close to winning it on Route 66, but they let Vancouver finish the map, and they choked. They absolutely choked. Everyone's saying, London choke all the time. Well, they do this season at times, but London are not historically a team to choke, so this should be interesting. It's something London need to work out moving towards the playoffs if they get in them. But it's not a devastating result for London, but it's a result that could have been better. Vancouver, still on track as always. Moving on with the Paris Eternal taking on the Philadelphia Fusion. Now this was an upset and a half, with the Paris Eternal taking a 3-2 win over the Philadelphia Fusion. Again, Philadelphia Fusion is showing some of their inconsistencies that I've been remarking about for quite a long time. And Fusion are really quite teetering on the edge right now. They're at risk. They're kind of outside the playoffs now. But the people at the bottom of the play-ins run are actually coming up on their backs. So Philadelphia Fusion need to make sure that they're keeping one eye behind them, as well as one eye on the people in front. But, big win for the Paris Eternal. They needed this win to stay within grasp. So, moving on, we have the Toronto Defiant taking on the Florida Mayhem, two teams that are completely out of the picture. And, I tell you what's funny, as soon as teams seem to go out of the running and have pretty much nothing to play for, they seem to step up, and we're seeing that with the Florida Mayhem. They get another win, a 3-1 over the Toronto Defiant. Toronto have actually not looked too bad this stage, but Florida squeeze out a win. Gargoyle is looking really good, and that's promising running into the future for the Florida Mayhem going into 2020, and that's 2 wins on a bounce, and that's more than the Florida Mayhem have managed in quite a while. But, again, it wasn't too meaningful of a fixture. Moving on, we have the Hangzhou Charge taking on the Seoul Dynasty. Now, this had big implications. Hangzhou Charge are looking really good in this meta right now. Seoul Dynasty, inconsistencies with Seoul. As ever, inconsistencies with Seoul. Hangzhou Charge end up running out 3-2 winners. You notice these games are a lot closer in this stage compared to the last few stages. A lot of 3-2s, a lot of 3-1s, not much in terms of 4-0s. It's really nice to see. But Hangzhou Charge, they keep on running, and I tell you what, I wouldn't want to meet them in the play-ins. They are a team to watch out for at the moment. Moving on, we have the Boston Uprising taking on the Washington Justice. The Washington Justice are having a stage, aren't they? They have really, really clicked with this meta, and they are yet to lose in this stage, and that continues here with them beating the Boston Uprising 3-1. I mean, this is an awful loss for Boston. I mean, you just can't lose that game. You can't. They are well on the outside of playing contention now, losing that game. It's a game really they had to win. Washington Justice, though, believe it or not, they're actually catching the pack of like Toronto and Houston. It's amazing what Washington Justice are doing this stage. It's a shame it's come a bit too late. If we had 2-2 roll lock in stage 3, I think Washington Justice would have been a realistic team to say they might just squeeze in. It's unfortunate the timing for the Washington Justice, but it looks really good for next year. Moving on, Dallas Fuel taking on the Los Angeles Gladiators. Now, this was a game I always saw the Gladiators winning, but it was a lot closer than we expected. 3-2 to the Gladiators. Not good for the Fuel. I mean, Fuel, it's do or die at the moment. You need to start winning games, and unfortunately, the opponents aren't easy. But at this point in the season, you just need to win games, and it's not quite coming off for the Dallas Fuel. It just seems a bit disjointed at the Fuel at times. It kind of did last season as well. So, it's unfortunate for the Fuel, but Gladiators, they squeak past almost banana skin. Moving on, we have the San Francisco Shock taking on the Shanghai Dragons. The Shanghai Dragons have fallen off a bit during this stage, with them not adapting too well to having to play the off-tank. And San Francisco Shock have been looking as solid as ever. We've been seeing Sinatra's Doomfist, which has been pretty good. We've been seeing Architect more as well. And they get a 3-1 victory over the Shanghai Dragons. Not what the Shanghai Dragons were looking for, but not the end of the world. Shock still on the march. Moving on, we had the Hangzhou Spark taking on the New York Excelsior. New York, they're doing the thing they did last season. I don't think necessarily it's them having problems adjusting to the meta. I think it's more New York trying new things, knowing that they're pretty much guaranteed in the playoffs, and mucking around a bit. They get the 3-2 victory over the Hangzhou Spark. Hangzhou make life very difficult for the New York Excelsior. It's not a brilliant result for the Hangzhou Spark, but it's not the end of the world. They got some fixtures they do need to start winning, though, coming up in the next few weeks. New York, I think that sealed them their division. I'm pretty sure that sealed them their division, considering London lost against Vancouver. But everything's pretty normal there. Moving on, we had the Houston Outlaws taking on the London Spitfire. Houston Outlaws used to be a bogey team for the London Spitfire, but not so much this time. It ends 3-1 to the London Spitfire. It's not close. Don't get me wrong, it's not close. London just have this habit of on the last map, when they're 3-0 up, of just like completely switching off and just taking it for granted, and then they end up giving their opposition the map. They did it against Guangzhou as well. They could have easily 4-0'd that game, and they didn't. They ended up 3-1ing it. But London get a big win that they needed to get because they were on the back of 2 losses before that, and that is London's second to last game of the season as well, so London are looking in a decent place right now to get into those playoffs, although they're not sealed. Moving on, we had the Seoul Dynasty taking on the Toronto Defiant. This was almost banana skinned, the Seoul Dynasty here. Toronto Defiant. 2-1 to Seoul in the end. Oh, that inconsistency almost crept up again, didn't it, Dynasty? If you'd lost this one, then, it was almost curtains on your playoff hopes. They needed to win it. They did get the win. Toronto, nothing to be ashamed of. But a big win for Seoul. They did need to get that win on the board. Moving on, Florida Mayhem taking on the Los Angeles Valiant. A must win for the Los Angeles Valiant. Florida Mayhem trying to prove themselves. And this is close. I mean, if Valiant had lost this, they would have been out, basically. 2-1 to the Valiant. Oh boy. 2 2-1s in a row, by the way, as well. Don't see that very often. But Valiant, they scrape through. They literally scrape through. Florida, they're looking a lot more competent than they were. But Valiant, they managed to keep themselves on track just. But man, that was nerve-wracking for the Valiant. After that, we had the Chengdu Hunters taking on the Hangzhou Spark. Chengdu lose this one 3-1 to the Hangzhou Spark, and I tell you what, that's a big win for Hangzhou. They really needed to turn things around. And finally, they seem to be grasping just a bit of the meta now. They seem to be getting a bit more comfortable with things. And with the Valiant winning against the Florida Mayhem, Chengdu losing is exactly what the Valiant needed. So, Chengdu do hold on to a play-in spot at the moment, but it's not as concrete as it was before after the loss to the Hangzhou Spark. Hangzhou, however, keeping their playoff hopes alive. Moving on, we had the Philadelphia Fusion taking on the Vancouver Titans. And I think this game shows you the disparity between the champions of last year and the runners-up of last year. Obviously, champions were Spitfire and the runners-up were Fusion, both playing Vancouver this week. And this wasn't close. Vancouver ran out 4-0 winners over the Philadelphia Fusion. Fusion, weird at the moment. There's a lot of reliance on Carpe to pop off, I think. And it's not happening. Carpe on Reaper doesn't really pop off as much as he does on the likes of Widowmaker. and it really shows when they go up against the bigger teams. It really, really does show. Philadelphia Fusion really need to find a bit of consistency going into the end of the season, because it's not looking concretely brilliant. Although they do have a buffer over the rest of the teams below them, the teams below them have to play a lot more games than the Fusion do. They only play one more game for the rest of the season, the Fusion. So, it's not easy. It's not easy, and they're relying on other teams to muck up, which is never the ideal place to be in. Moving on, we had the Washington Justice taking on the Houston Outlaws. After the Houston Outlaws lost to the London Spitfire, they were mathematically out of the play-ins, so rip for Houston's season, but they still wanted to put in a decent display against the Washington Justice, and this is a 5-mapper. It's 3-2 to the Washington Justice in the end, but Houston, they give an account of themselves, but Washington is so good right now. It's actually ridiculous to see the change in Washington Justice from Stage 3 to Stage 4 just because of the meta. It's ridiculous. But Houston, it's all about building for next season now. Problem is, they just need their organisation sorted out. And there's nothing the players can do about that. It's up to the owners and everything to get sorted. And we will wait in the off-season to hear news about that, I hope. But moving on after that, we had the San Francisco Shock taking on the Dallas Fuel. Dallas Fuel on a very, very poor run of form right now. And the San Francisco Shock are the San Francisco Shock. So what do? They 4-0 the Dallas Fuel. I don't think anyone's surprised about this result, to be quite honest. Dallas are... It's a shame, because after Stage 3, Dallas were looking like, well, they're going to squeak into the play-ins. And now they're looking like, actually, they don't look like getting in the play-ins at all. After such a torrid stage, this stage, it looks really, really dire for the Dallas Fuel now. If they were to make it through, I'd be very surprised. But it's still possible for the Dallas Fuel. It's just very difficult. And then the last game of the week was Guangzhou Charge taking on the New York Excelsior. And as I said, New York Excelsior are trying things. They're being the New York Excelsior. They didn't have a brilliant Stage 4 last season because they already knew they were fairly cushy at the top of the league. And they're doing the same this season. 4-0 to the Guangzhou Charge. You give Guangzhou Charge an inch and they're going to take a mile. Brilliant result. Brilliant result for the Charge. But I wouldn't be really desperately worried if I was Excelsior. I mean, they may now lose their second spot in the league to the Shock. But that doesn't matter because it's the winners of the divisions that gets the buys. So Shock are in the same division as the Titans, so they can't get a buy by moving ahead of Excelsior. Excelsior have got that buy sealed up. So Excelsior are doing Excelsior things right now. Sandbagging, if you want to call it that. I think they will be a bit better than they are now when it comes to the playoffs. It just depends, are they good enough not to choke like they did last year? That's the big thing about the Excelsior. Guangzhou Charge, though, boy, they are looking good. They are only actually 2 wins off of the playoff places. Unfortunately, they only have 1 game left. So, unfortunately for the Guangzhou Charge, it looks like they're not going to make it to the overall playoffs automatically. But I really think they're almost nailed on for play-ins now, which is really good considering they had an iffy mid-season in the league. But if we look at the standings, you've got the Titans at the top of the standings, obviously, because the Titans are the Titans. Excelsior are still second, although you can see that the loss record is the same as the Shock now. We notice that Titans and Excelsior have sealed up their respective divisions, Titans for the Pacific and Excelsior for the Atlantic. Also, the Shock have sealed up a top 6 spot, so they will definitely be in our playoffs. I don't think anyone doubted that, though. But the big thing here is the Gladiators, the Spark, and the Spitfire and the Dynasty have all locked a top 12 spot. So they'll all definitely be in the play-ins. You can see that there is actually a 2-win gap between the Dynasty and the Spitfire right now. So if Spitfire can win their last game, I believe they will seal up a spot. Their last game is against Atlanta, though, who are unbeaten this stage. Or are unbeaten since their homestand, actually. But it's looking decent for the teams that are in the playoffs right now. It's the other teams have got a lot of work to do. I don't think Charge can't make it, I don't think mathematically, but Dragons, I think, are going to struggle now. Fusion are also going to struggle, who are now down in 10th. Dynasty, I think, are the only team that could upset the apple cart for the top 6 now, and it's looking more and more unlikely. I think it heavily depends on the Spark. I think the Spark are the team that are at risk, because they've got more games to play, the games aren't easy, and they're a team that looks iffy in the meta right now. Okay, so if we go through the rest of the league, Dynasty in 7th, Dragons in 8th, Charge in 9th, Fusion in 10th, Reign are up to 11th, but look at their map differential, +8. Brilliant for the Reign. 12th, we have the Hunters, not very far ahead of the Los Angeles Valiant, who are 13th. Fuel are 14th, but they're looking like they're kind of falling out of contention now, along with the Eternal in 15th and the Uprising in 16th. Uprising have got a few more games to play than the teams around them, but Uprising is not looking brilliant at all. Obviously, the Houston Outlaws are now down in 17th. They are eliminated from contention for the play-ins, along with the Defiant in 18th. Justice in 19th, but they're actually catching the Defiant and the Outlaws, which is quite funny. And Mayhem, obviously, still bottom of the league. Not quite having the turnaround that the Justice have got, but they are looking better than they were. So, that sets us up for Week 4. Week 4 will see some teams finish their season. London will finish their season in week 4, I believe. So will the Charge, the Fusion. So there's going to be some teams that are going to end their season, and they have to, some of them, end on a high. If London Spitfire, as I said, win against Atlanta, I think they pretty much seal, if not mathematically seal, a top 6 place. So a lot's possible. A lot's possible in Week 4, but we will do a preview for that one. And we're nearly at the end now. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I will see you in the next video. See you then.